points of order and rules. So we're going to have an interactive conversation with our discussants here up on stage. And we will have, at the end of the evening, a chance for everyone in the audience to ask their questions. So if you do have questions, please note them down. Please keep them, and then we will have someone come to you with a microphone so that you can ask your questions to the discussants. Please don't speak off the mic because it won't be captured for the people that are online. And we want to give as many people a chance to speak, so please be short, be brief, get straight to the point. We also have a photographer in the house. Please raise your hand if you would prefer not to be photographed and not to show up in any of the photos online. We understand there might be some people who may not be comfortable with being here. Our photographer is going to note who does not want to be photographed. Those points being handled, and again with apologies for the delay in time, I'd like to call our speakers to come up stage, beginning first of all with Francesca Albanese.
Yes.
Apologies, I thought you would launch right into your presentation. So Francesca, what has been happening right now with the situation, particularly regarding the ceasefire, and what has been your work in these last few months? Just
thank you.
Started.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much, Legal Mobilization Platform and PACAUS, and to all of you, friends known and new, for being here tonight. If you don't mind, I would like to comment on some of the issues you raised, because I think they will help us frame what I thought to share with you on the ceasefire, what it means in the general context where we are. Where, I mean, if you ask many Palestinians under Israeli occupation right now and brutal assault, they wouldn't know what a ceasefire looks like because the fire is not ceased for them. But you mentioned that this period has exposed the limitations of international law. I would disagree in one respect. I think that this period has exposed the extent, and in fact, and the length, and the magnitude, and the dimension of the Palestinian exceptions, because international law has been experienced by Palestinians in its absence, and its lack of effectiveness, rather than its capacity of empower and bring justice. The limitations of international law are the same that have always been. It's political power, economic power, financial power. And what is exposed today is the extent of the influence of the two latter over the former. We live in a system where clearly geopolitical interests and financial interests are as powerful as to not only to make certain people in power or not, and when I say in power, I also think of the media and the power they hold, able not to see, to turn their eyes away, while civilians are being slaughtered, literally. I keep on saying I don't remember another. And again, we have not missed anything in terms, and we have not spared ourselves anything in terms of brutality. And still, this last assault on Gaza has been brutal, particularly for how it has scarred the children. I mean, I'm aware there are children in the room, in this room, and I will not get into the usual spiel of the horrors. But again, no one should see children hanging from the wall. And this is what I've seen. And this is not something that certain people have prepared not to see. This is something that has been justified and enabled, including in this country, including in my own country. So we need to reflect together on how did we get there, and also what has been exposed, the extent of how racialized is the system we live in. Again, it's not that we didn't know, but now we know. The really it's in daylight. It's unapologetic, and it's so rapacious and furious that it doesn't disdain hitting on us if we protest in our liberal democracy, or as Omar Barghouti would say, in our quasi-liberal democracies. And erasure. We are seeing erasure of the Palestinian people. Again, no. We are seeing what risks to be the ultimate stage of the erasure of the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian people are under threat and, in fact, face erasure. I mean, I've been facing erasure for 100 years. 100 years. It's 100 years that the Palestinians deal with it, with the brutal face of European colonialism. I'm sorry, but this is the reality. I understand the plight of the Holocaust has been a tragedy, but this is our responsibility, and has been unleashed on the Palestinians. And justice. What does justice mean today? For sure, it means accountability. Accountability. Today, it must be retributive justice. It must be justice that hits the architects, those that this genocide have ordered and also executed as much as possible. Because this, I mean, and in a way, this is the culmination. We wouldn't have been here speaking tonight hadn't it been for the impunity that Israel has enjoyed since its very existence, and before, in fact. And this must end. But justice cannot be understood only as retributive. The Palestinians deserve historical justice. There is an historical injustice that goes, I mean, it's part of the DNA of the Palestinian people as Nakba survivors, where there are other Holocausts that have not hit the entirety of a people. When a given people was, let's say, distributed around the world, the Palestinian people are all Nakba survivors because their homeland has been dismembered and they have become a nation scattered around the world. And it must be restorative as well. We must, I mean, it's important to focus on the perpetrators, but it's even more important to focus on the victims. And I don't like this term much, but at the same time, while they are strong and resilient, and we should not romanticize, there are also people who have very deep and wounds that need to heal, to be healed. And the Palestinians are an incredible, really resilient people with a strong sense of identity and generosity. This will help, but they need to have the conditions to heal. And it's not going to be easy. Think that 5,000 children have already been found, and this is because the screening has begun, but during the ceasefire, since the beginning of the ceasefire, 5,000 children have been found with permanent cognitive dysfunction. They won't heal. This won't heal. And 41% of the adult population in Gaza, meaning anyone above 18, is taking care of children who are not his or her own, not their own. So this is the situation. What has happened in Gaza is a genocide, and I have no doubt about that. And it's not even that. It's not even. We can I guess if you're here, probably you are also familiar with my work, what I've done, what others have done, including Amnesty International, Forensic Architecture. I've exposed in detail what has happened, what has been done to the people in Gaza. But in my last report, I said the same pattern, the similar patterns to what has been done to the Palestinians in Gaza, particularly the killing of people. Now 870 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 23. 870, including 170 kids. And it continues. But also already in October, I was reporting when the Palestinians killed in the West Bank were 700. And the attack on the health facilities and civilian infrastructure. The health facility in the West Bank has been attacked more times than in Gaza. But of course, in Gaza, it has been more destructive. Why we're destroying hospitals, clinics, and ambulances and targeting medical personnel in the West Bank? And the other thing is the torture. Nearly 10,000 Palestinians have been arrested and detained in the West Bank. Not new. Israel has done it. I've analyzed this. This was my second report. And this is why nothing of what we are seeing is new. It's not surprising. It's shocking, but not surprising. And so they have been arrested and detained arbitrarily by an unlawful occupation. And they have, many of them have been tortured. And I don't have updated figures, but 70 until end of October, 70 Palestinians were killed while in detention, many of them under torture. It's really brutal. So in the face of all this, and this is what I wanted to share as the last point of these initial remarks. Shall we despair? Not really. If we have time to despair, it means that we have also a lot of privilege. And I'm not saying that because what we feel is not real. It's feeling nauseated, sickened, and enraged, depressed. It's normal. It's normal. This is what we are as human beings. I mean, and think of the Palestinians among us. Think of the Palestinians that on top of what they were suffering, seeing what was done to their people. And I often say I've learned from the Palestinians and other people from the Arab region. I mean, a people is like a body. You chop a limb and the entire body suffers. And this is what gives us the idea of what has been happening to them. And the Palestinians have continued to be killed and blamed and smeared. I mean, in this part of the world, you talk to people and it seems that the Palestinians brought this havoc upon themselves, just like that. Let's forget 100 years of dispossession, displacement. Let's forget 57 years of unlawful occupation that has turned into a vehicle to steal the land, to displace the people in the name of security, and more now, and this is shocking in 2025, God. So, what we need to do is not to despair. I keep on saying hope is a discipline. It's not my quote. I'm citing someone else, an activist for once. And we have three things to do: educate ourselves and others. We need to know. We need to know the facts. And we need to know what it means legally, not because you need to be mini lawyers, no, but because this allows you, empowers you to see how your political representatives are betraying your constitution, the rules that you have in this country, and are making you responsible of the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. And we can go to this later. But also, it's important to educate others. We need to push back on the narrative that has been imposed. I mean, it's incredible how much the public debate has been dominated by voices who have really reproduced and amplified, I wouldn't say the Israeli narrative, the government's narrative, the military narrative, because there are also Israelis who are fighting against, side by side, one step behind, because ultimately this is the liberation of the Palestinian people. Of course, Jewish Israelis have a responsibility, of course, and those who fight honestly one step behind the Palestinians, but they are against the apartheid, occupation, and genocide. Do you hear them in our TVs or on our newspapers? No. Very good. You're lucky, because the majority of the people here, not really, and also depends on what you read, sir. And the other thing is that we need to discover and rediscover a sense of togetherness, a sense of community, my community who thinks together and act together. And international law, again, is not, it's incredible that it continues to be used by some, invoked when it's convenient, and then referred to as a useless paraphernalia of some woke culture. And no, instead, international law is a system of rules and mechanisms that should restrain, confine politics and even diplomacy. And this is something we need to know. And resolving the question of Palestinian international law, according to international law, is not complicated. It's simple. It's simple. I know it's easier said than done. I know. But this is where we need to go. The goal is end the genocide now. It's not over, despite the ceasefire. End the occupation. There is a deadline, you know. By September this year, Israel has been ordered by the International Court of Justice to withdraw the troops, to dismantle the settlements, and to relinquish any form of control that it has on Palestinian resources, because it has practiced racial discrimination and apartheid and annexation, and makes reparation and do not hamper the return of those who have been displaced. And these are also responsibility that your government here has to make it happen, all the more at the time of a genocide, and it shouldn't have transferred, or it should not transfer arms directly or indirectly, in total or in parts, to Israel. So we need to think together and act together. This is what we have to do. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you so much, Francesca. A lot of things that you've brought out about your work currently. I have a few questions, but I think some of them will come up when we have our other speakers. But I wanted to focus on one thing, the actual now what can we do? Because what are the possibilities of justice in light of, as you pointed out, the financial, economic, and geopolitical power of the backers of Israel and the people that we are actually up against as what is emerging as like a global peace movement, I would think. You say we have to rediscover togetherness and come together. But will that be enough to push back against what we see as this overwhelming power that up until now we seem to not have been able to stop? And if there is a possibility to do so, what are the avenues?
As with others, we will have the chance to say tonight, and every piece of action is necessary and in and of its own is not sufficient. So the BDS is necessary. The action of the lawyers and the civil society who are taking to court politicians and businesses, governments and businesses, is also essential. So let's unpack it. When we say let it be justice, let it be justice. So let's understand what it is. We have norms. We have norms at the international level. We also have norms that are international norms that are incorporated in our domestic systems. I mean, I discovered that you also have Article 90 of the Dutch Constitution, which allows international law to be recognized as a source of law. So and then you have law enforcement mechanisms. So the authorities are responsible to apply, not to violate international law. And then when this system fails, when there is no enforcement, this is where there must be accountability. And who are those who are responsible? It's much more complex than government. While government have huge responsibility, because they have responsibility not to recognize, for example, the legality of the occupation, not just the settlements, the legality of the occupation. It's in its totality. Israel's president. Oh man, sorry.
It's okay.
Well, let's say that it was not intuitive that there would be a bottle under my feet. and so while each country should not aid and assist, not recognize the consequences as legal consequences to an unlawful act, and then try to bring to an end an illegal act. This is with the occupation. Instead, what our governments in Europe, for example, our countries in Europe and European Union as a whole, continues to trade both weapons and goods and research, and it's incredible. It's a matrix. This is the thing. When right now I'm looking at, I almost regret I decided to look at the private sector, because it's huge. Without it, the occupation couldn't exist. And somehow, chances are that we are contributing to it. So we need to make sure that we have apartheid-free pantries and fridges. But for this, Omar is much a better place than me to speak, because the BDS has done an incredible job, not only at monitoring what's out there, but how we can contribute as ordinary citizens, at least not to buy from the occupation, and then. So when we talk of the private sector, you need to understand there is the military component, which is both structural to Israel. Israel is first and foremost a military state. It is to be a military state, to exist with the suprematism it carries. But it's also a military state because it sells. It has been selling for 75 years military equipment, tools, methodologies, tactics, intelligence to all dictators in the world. In fact, I'm sorry to say, but this is something that makes me understand why today this industry, the military industry that Israel has, is so flourishing. So this needs to this needs to end, and the only way to end is to know it. We need to know. This is why I say I wanted to expose this, but also the surveillance system, which is, again, there is right now, including in our system, the Israelization and Palestinization of the relations among states and between states and citizens. And there is a level of surveillance, including among us, and the producer is Israel, primarily. And then there are like those who appear innocuous, the companies. I've heard from a government, I won't tell you which country, and you will not guess, because I've been in 4 different countries. No, this is the third, in 10 days. But in one country, let's say, public official said, we cannot divest from companies that produce food in the West Bank. They also sell food to the Palestinians. How nice. I say, yeah, let's wait for the US to come to... Oops. No, it's not the Danes. I wanted to trick you. And no, it's really not the Danes. It's not the Danes. And the pension funds. I think, for example, that a country like Norway, it makes no sense. I mean, Norway is pretty good. I mean, not just in words. It has done important things. But then Norway has a pension fund, so all the revenues from the oil that they have, I mean, lead it to be the largest European investor in the occupied Palestinian territory, which accounts for 10% of the whole European investments. So you see how intricate it is. This needs to end. And then there are individuals who sell Palestinian property in the West Bank from Western capitals. And then there are the charities who have been doing money laundering. It's incredible. So this is why, again, accountability is also means making individuals accountable. And of course, then there are the soldiers, and there is the work of the Hind Rajam Foundation, which is splendid. I think everyone in this room will know about that. So there are many things that have to happen, but also there is the work of civil servants. That needs to oppose needs to confront the power from within. Like soldiers cannot commit, soldiers have an obligation to abide by orders, military orders, yes, but not to if the orders include the commission of international crimes. How can it be that the same doesn't apply to civil servants? So chapeau to those who are resisting this system. And the other thing, scholars, university staff, and students. Students, I will not say anything because you are the only one who has, who's been pretty reprehensible over the past months. So everyone has a role to play, and this time, I'm sorry to say, you will need lawyers. Lawyers will be in great demand over the past years, I hope and I expect.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and such a great segue already to our next speaker. Before I ask Omar to come on, I'd like to just put a question that we don't have to answer right now, which is the Palestinians facing repercussions for fighting against the colonial actions of Israel. How is this an example for other countries elsewhere that are pushing back against this global colonial movement? I'd like to just to think about this also as a way to find the interconnectedness of the Palestinian struggle with other colonial, anti-colonial struggles globally. And maybe we can come back to this after we have a quick look. Omar Barghouti, who's from the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions Movement. So as I've already said, Omar is one of the co-founders of the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions Movement, and he's a Palestinian activist. I'll just leave it at that and let you say what remarks you have prepared for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Proud to be with Francesca and everyone else. Oops.
Put it closer.
Can you hear me well? Okay. Well, I want to start with the elephant in the room, Trump. Trump's new plan for forcibly displacing over 2 million Palestinians from Gaza is actually not new, and it's not his. Moreover, it's a deliberate distraction from the genocide and the absolute need for accountability, as Francesca has mentioned. Ethnically cleansing Gaza is Israel's old plan that Trump is now duly and obsessively trying to market. It's anything but new, as forced displacement and physical erasure of the indigenous people of Palestine is as old as Zionist settler colonialism. Let's remember that days into the start of Israel's genocide in October 2023, a leaked Israeli Ministry of Intelligence document revealed a plan for ethnically cleansing Gaza, in fact. Not to be outdone and to make forced displacement sound normal in comparison, on 5 November 23, Israel's Minister of Heritage from the Jewish Power Party suggested dropping a nuclear bomb on the Gaza ghetto. Israel's ultimate goal in its ongoing genocide in Gaza remains to ethnically cleanse our people again in a 21st century Nakba of dispossession, demolition, displacement, and utter dehumanization. Still, this Netanyahu-Trump plan is beyond depraved. It is sheer evil. Planning to forcibly displace Palestinian survivors of genocide in the illegally occupied Gaza Strip constitutes not just a war crime, but a continuation of the genocide, which not many are focusing on. It is actually a continuation of the genocide, the crime of crimes, as a leading Palestinian human rights organization has put it. It's a desperate attempt also to normalize Israel's live stream genocide and to achieve, through US imperialist bullying, what Israel's military prowess has utterly failed to accomplish after 15 months of genocide. Another fact that's never mentioned, Israel has actually failed to achieve its objectives. In fact, only 4% of Jewish Israelis believe that Israel's goals were fully achieved in Gaza, according to a recent poll. As early as December 23, the US defense establishment actually warned Israel of such a strategic defeat. Like all settler colonies, Israel has long desired to exterminate the indigenous people of Palestine, if it could get away with it. For decades, it has committed what Ilan Pappé has called incremental genocide. A recent error by Israel's censors has accidentally revealed secret documents exposing Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion's conscious decision to wipe out Palestinian villages during the 1948 Nakba, as a necessary condition to create what Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem today calls a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. In a particularly shocking testimony of an Israeli soldier reported in the now defunct Israeli paper Davar, he described what his fellow Israeli soldiers perpetrated in the Palestinian village of Al-Dawayima in 1948. He said, quote, "To kill the children, they fractured their heads with sticks. The men and women of the villages were pushed into houses without food or water. Then the soldiers came to dynamite the houses. One commander ordered a soldier to bring 2 women into a house he was about to blow up. Another soldier prided himself upon having raped an Arab woman before shooting her to death. Another Arab woman with her newborn baby was made to clean the place for a couple of days, and then they shot her and the baby. Educated and well-mannered commanders," he says, "who were considered good guys, became base murderers, and this not in the storm of battle, but as a method of expulsion and extermination. The fewer the Arabs who remain, the better." End of quote. This remains the slogan of the Zionist settler colonial movement: the fewer the Arabs who remain, the better. So fast forward to 2008, when Labour Party, you know, the lefties, the nice guys, leader Matan Velnai threatened Palestinians with a bigger Holocaust if resistance groups did not stop their armed retaliation to Israel's siege and violent attacks on Gaza. So when Israeli leaders today drool over ethnically cleansing most of Gaza to re-establish illegal settlements there, they're being honest representatives of the founding principles of Zionism and Zionist settler colonialism. Those principles are in full display in Israel's intensifying gradual ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. Israeli War Minister Israel Katz has referred to the military attack on Jenin, for instance, as, quote, "the first lesson from the method of repeated raids in Gaza," end of quote. Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, a self-declared fascist homophobe, has incited fanatic colonial violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, saying, quote, "Nablus and Jenin need to look like Jabalia," end of quote. Israel's name for its murderous attack in the West Bank is called Iron Wall. This refers to a booklet by the same title published in 1923 by Jabotinsky, a key Zionist leader from the right wing, who honestly wrote in it, quote, "Zionist colonization," he was really honest, "Zionist colonization must either stop or else proceed regardless of the native population, which means that it can proceed and develop only under the protection of a power that's independent of the native population, behind an iron wall which the native population cannot breach," end of quote. Jabotinsky's Iron Wall, for those who have read his work, a pillar in Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine, has always included not just brute colonization of the land, but essentially a simultaneous colonization of the minds of the indigenous Palestinians with dread and despair. The erasure of the natives demands enacting not just genocide, but also epistemicide, the killing of knowledge, the native knowledge and knowledge about the natives. Still, the colonizer's will is always challenged with the will and agency of the colonized. Israel was forced, after all, forced to accept ceasefire terms that it had rejected for many months. The chief factor behind this must be the legendary sumud, resilience and resistance of the Palestinian people, supported by an exponentially growing global solidarity movement led by the BDS movement. While Palestinians have welcomed the ceasefire agreement with immense relief, we're keenly aware that it's only the necessary first step to end the genocide. without massive pressure, this ceasefire may constitute a continuation of the genocide in less visible forms that the US and Israel hope will provoke less regional and global outrage, boycotts, and sanctions. This genocide, after all, has intentionally reduced the illegally occupied Gaza into an unlivable territory to cause continued mass loss of Palestinian lives, continued spread of infectious diseases as well as famine for years to come, while attempting, again, to force as many Palestinians as possible into exile. Despite the typical militaristic bravado, it is far from evident that the Israeli establishment wishes to resume the ruthless bombardment and massacres in Gaza. Israel's economy is experiencing what 130 of its top economists describe as a spiral of collapse, with an almost unprecedented brain drain, a nose-diving tech industry, and a credit rating that is near junk levels, according to Moody's. Increasingly seen by investors as what we call a shutdown nation, Israel has ranked dead last among 50 countries in the just-released Nations Brand Index. The chairman of the Israel Export Institute admits, quote, BDS and boycotts have changed Israel's global trade landscape, end of quote. As evidenced by repeated UN votes, the overwhelming majority of nations today see Israel as a rogue state that has not only exterminated tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza and in a few weeks killed thousands in Lebanon and occupied large swaths of Syria, but is simultaneously bulldozing the very tenets of international law. Israel's prime minister is wanted by the ICC for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICJ, as was mentioned, in January 24 decided Israel is plausibly committing genocide, and in July 24 ruled that the occupation is illegal and Israel is practicing apartheid. Israel's total criminality and impunity are beginning to be met with relentless efforts to enforce accountability at all levels. This all explains Israel's heightened vulnerability to BDS tactics, especially now. In the face of all of Israel's ongoing carnage, and to exercise our moral agency, we in the BDS movement have learned to persistently channel our grief and our rage into principled and strategic struggles to end its genocide and dismantle its underlying regime of settler colonialism and apartheid, and to hold the perpetrators and their accomplices, including your past and present leaders, to account. Palestinians have no illusions, though, that justice will shine on us from the ICJ or the UN. We have international law and the ethical high ground on our side as an indigenous people resisting a depraved genocidal system of oppression to achieve our rights. Ethics and the law are necessary in our and any other liberation struggle, but they are never sufficient. To resist and abolish a system of oppression, the oppressed invariably need power as well. People power, effective solidarity power, grassroots power, intersectional coalition power, media power, cultural power, peaceful disruption power, strategic litigation power, among other forms. When the Palestinian consensus calls for BDS, we're not begging for charity. We're calling for meaningful solidarity. And above both, we're demanding an end to complicity, to do no harm. Unspeakable criminality and shameless complicity must be met with inexorable accountability. As the struggle that abolished apartheid in South Africa has shown, ending state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's regime of oppression, especially through the nonviolent tactics of BDS, is the most effective form of solidarity. BDS is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian society. It's inspired by the South African anti-apartheid struggle and the US civil rights movement, and it's rooted in a century of Palestinian popular resistance. It aims at ending Israel's occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid, and most importantly, upholding the right of Palestinian refugees to return and receive reparations. Anchored in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the BDS movement categorically opposes all forms of racism, including anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. There's nothing Jewish about Israel's occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, or genocide, and therefore there's nothing anti-Jewish in countering those oppressions and systems and structures of oppression to achieve Palestinian freedom. Over the last 20 years, the movement has built a massive network worldwide, supported by trade unions, farmers' unions, racial, social, gender, and climate justice movements, together representing tens of millions. Very quickly, what BDS is focusing on, a few points. Other than peacefully disrupting business as usual in complicit states, corporations, and so on, other than escalating strategic boycotts and divestment at all levels, academic, sports, cultural, economic, and so on, other than convincing businesses, cultural, academic institutions to become apartheid-free zones, there's something I wanted to focus on. Because given the Trump moment, this is the time for broad tent coalitions. One very important point in the BDS movement we always advocate is at the institutional level, city councils, universities, and so on, to push for intersectional ethical investment guidelines and ethical procurement guidelines that are not country-specific, not conflict-specific. So let's say all progressive movements at a university push for ethical procurement guidelines, ethical investment guidelines. That means this university will not have contracts with companies involved in grave human rights violations, atrocity crimes anywhere in the world, period. Once that passes, now I would love to see an administrator in a university saying, no, we want to have unethical relations. So, I mean, this should be the easiest thing to really push. I've had that in Derry City Council in the north of Ireland. I proposed an ethical procurement guideline, and of course everyone supported it except one, the DEP, the right-wing. And then people were like, what in this text do you oppose? It just says, we cannot contract companies involved in grave And he said, just because Sinn Féin and others support it, I cannot. So you'll have those idiots, but regardless, in general, it'll be very difficult to push against. Pressuring government, your government, which is deeply complicit, to end its shameful complicity, beginning with the military embargo, as Francesca has mentioned. This is a matter of duty, not discretion. And someone should tell your government that it's not a matter of your opinion, whether you like it or not. You are obliged to do this under international law. So to defeat Trumpism, Israeli genocidal exceptionalism, and the rising wave of fascism worldwide, broad tent, inclusive, anti-racist alliances are more important than ever. This is not just an ethically desired strategy to unite racial, climate, social, gender, and economic justice movements to build a critical mass of people power that's needed, but the current threat to humanity shows that the intersectional unity of those struggles has truly become an existential need. Egyptian and Greek mythologies mention the phoenix rising from the ashes, while Palestinians in Gaza have shown that this is not entirely a myth. With the shaky ceasefire barely holding, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian genocide survivors have emerged from the carnage in this land, whose civilization goes back 4,000 years, marching to the north of Gaza with hope, despite knowing that almost all their homes, roads, services, schools, hospitals have been wiped out. The real aspiration of most of them is to keep marching to real home, to where their families had been ethnically cleansed during the 1948 Nakba. The Palestinian phoenix of Gaza is emerging from under the rubble to reassert to the world that we shall never bow to oppressors. We shall continue to resist oppression and insist on defending our inalienable rights. But in mythology, a phoenix needs sunlight to resurrect itself. And in our case, that sunlight is blocked by dark, heavy clouds of complicity. Principled and strategic solidarity is crucial to dissipate those dark clouds so we can rise to our inevitable emancipation. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Omar. How does somebody follow up such an eloquent and well put presentation? I think I'll then have to really come down to the very specific key question maybe some people here in the audience have, that is, here in the Netherlands, how can people participate in the BDS movement? Of course, I'm pretty sure there's a website and you can see which companies to support and how not. But what would the BDS movement like as the form of sunlight on this particular phoenix at this particular moment?
Thanks for this. It really depends on where you are. Are you a student or an academic or a nurse or an engineer or, a social activist? It really depends where you are. Because BDS is not just about products boycotts. It's that, obviously, but it's also about divestment, which is institutional, requires much more power. It's also about academic boycott and cultural and sports. So there are many aspects of it that almost everyone can participate in. But the most important thing about BDS is that it's a collective action. Individually, I can boycott like 100 companies at the supermarket. Nice, but it doesn't lead to anything. It's the collective action against a few companies that can lead to impact. So that's very important. There is BDS in the Netherlands. There's BDS Netherlands, and they know what works best in the Netherlands. So I advise people to connect to BDS Netherlands first and foremost. Finally, it's extremely important to really stay away from the charity type of mentality, because it is so white. I mean, we hear it all the time. Yeah, we want to send some money to reestablish schools in Gaza. Absolutely, it's necessary. We need everything. I mean, Gaza is obliterated. We need everything. And your government has been part of this obliteration. So this is not charity. This is payback. I mean, the Netherlands has to pay back in many different ways, including criminal prosecution of Dutch officials who are responsible, but also reparation. This is not charity, this is reparation. The Netherlands owes Palestinians in Gaza reparation because it has participated in arming, defending, funding Israel throughout the genocide. So pressuring government is a responsibility for every single person, no matter where you are, no matter what kind of BDS activity you do. Applying enough mass pressure on government to change policy is extremely important. Final point. Government might seem a bit too high a goal to reach. What about city councils? Those are much more reachable. And some of them tend to have some progressive voices. Can we form intersectional progressive coalitions at city council level and push for ethical procurement guidelines and ethical investment and so on and so forth? That is doable. That is not impossible. And that's an intermediate step to affect government, to build enough people power to eventually affect government.
So if there was ever a time to engage in politics in the Netherlands, this is it. And if there's a time to be an activist, I guess this is it as well. And speaking of being in the Netherlands, Angelique Eijpe worked with the Dutch Foreign Service for quite a long time and decided at some point the Dutch position on what is happening in Gaza did not align well with her position. Angelique, may we please ask you to come and talk a bit about that work? You have the floor.
Thanks to the organizers, thanks to Pakhuis de Zwijger and to the Legal Mobilization Platform. And I'm very honored to sit here this evening with Francesca and with Omar at this panel. My story this evening is a little bit different. It's very much focused on the Netherlands rather than the situation in Gaza, which I think is what should be taking center stage. But I'm just going to speak a little bit from my experience. And to start off, I was at the lecture of Francesca last night, where you mentioned it just now as well, Francesca, that hope is a discipline, not an emotion, not a feeling, but it is a discipline. And I have to admit that over the past 16 months, there have been moments that I lost my discipline. I lost my hope. And I think you know, it is we've all seen a genocide unfolding for our eyes, and what has been even more sensitive and difficult for me in some way is to witness that my own state, my own government, and initially the ministry I was working for provided unequivocal support for that. And maybe also this desperation came also from the fact that my ambitions were too high, because not just me, but those that I worked with, what we aimed for was stopping the bombs, and if not the bombs, at least to stop, you know, the full complicity of the government we were working for. And I think that many of us, this is just something that we have started recently speaking about. Inside this room, outside this room, inside government, outside government, have been suffering of what is known as moral injury. You know, even if whether you protest your own government's policy or whether you comply and sit inside, you feel made complicit to what is happening. So I think it is by far not the greatest concern we have, once again, with what's happening in Gaza, but I think it's important to have this realization of what's happening to us as well. And so, at oftentimes, despite of the fact that what we did, you know, I resigned from my job. We, as civil servants and former civil servants, we started to organize. We wrote letters. We demonstrated every single week since December 21st in front of the ministry. Major networks were developed, but sometimes, as Hedy Dancona, one of our former ministers, always says, she says, yeah, you know, people ask me, does this help? And I say, no, it doesn't help. There's not a bomb less that falls because we sit here, but it helps me. So I think that's also a realization I've come to. This is also, in some way, it's also therapeutic work, what we're doing. Because what should I do? Should I put the blanket over my head and lie in bed until this is all over? No, we have to move for the cause, but also for ourselves. And so I'm speaking of a lot of darkness, but I also see some light in there, and that light has been basically the organization that has been happening over the past 16 months. And again, I'm speaking from my former civil servant experience. Just 1 week after October 7th, people within the context of the ministry started organizing and gathering and expressing concern over the policy that we were pursuing. There was an initial conversation with the highest officials that didn't really result in anything. There were letters written from within the ministry, signed by 400 civil servants within a week, within 24 hours. Just by word of mouth. A similar letter was written throughout government. And that didn't result in anything else but a message on the intranet of the ministry from the minister and from the Secretary General stating, we understand your emotions and feelings, but please stick to the policy you're responsible for and don't cross that line. Please let those that are in charge be in charge. And there were sessions organized, and there's a very strong parallel, I must say, with what happened in the U.S. at the State Department. As a way of managing this, listening sessions were organized. They had the same luistersessies in the Netherlands, listening sessions in the U.S., the identical wording to speak about our feelings and emotions, and not about policy. And this is a particularly what is the word I'm looking for? Extraordinary, because it was primarily women and women of color speaking out. And to be put in that framework of speaking about your emotions and feelings and not being seen as a professional with professional concerns was at a different level very disconcerting. And so this civil servant network was there, a network of former civil servants, former diplomats, former ambassadors, former ministers have joined. And that has been my silver lining within the context of the Netherlands. And then in addition to that, a Western civil service network has been developed with primarily, of course, our colleagues in the US who have been struggling the most. But not just there. We have people from Germany, from within the EU, and we've written op-eds together. We have a network to just support ourselves with the issues we're dealing with. And it has also very much resulted. One more thing. I think this is about Gaza, but given the state of our democracy throughout the Western world, we are really busy as well of thinking of how we can consolidate this, because I think there will be more situations coming our way, and it's already happening for our colleagues in the US. What they are facing is it should be unimaginable, but it isn't, unfortunately. How can we organize to keep the to play our role in keeping the democratic institutions that we have in some way alive and kicking, and what role can we play in that as civil servants? And the last thing I want to say is that there is this conception or this debate now ongoing of what is a good civil servant within the context of a democracy. And there is this one school of thought. In 2021, I wrote a letter with some colleagues to the then ministers about the Gaza war in May of that year. And we had a meeting with a high official, and that high official said, I have... So we wrote an email directly to the minister. This is very not done. And he told us, I've worked in civil service for 30 years, and I've never seen that people write a letter directly to the minister. But I think we need this kind of courage to step outside of what is the formally official line and the right line when it comes to this kind of situations in which we have political leadership that crosses the line. And what he said at that time, this is the thing that I wanted to say, he said, a good civil servant, he tells his minister, advises his minister one time, this is maybe not a good idea, a second time. And if you're courageous, you do it a third time. But then after 3 times, you loyally implement the policy. Because he's the democratically politically elected leader, and you are there to advise and support. And I fully agree with that assessment in the context of a democracy in 95% of the cases. But when you have a political leadership that asks of you to implement policy that go against your oath of office, against the Constitution, against international law, I think... And those civil servants speaking out now, that is the framework that they're speaking out on. It's your role as a civil servant to speak up and speak out. And not to, because we've been there right here in the Netherlands before. We've done okay, we're being told to do this, we'll just do it because somebody else tells us to do it. We want a civil service, I think, that dares to say no. And... so that's the movement sort of that I've been a part of, and I think is becoming increasingly important with regard to Gaza, but more broader than that. So that's just what I wanted to share for now.
Thank you so much, Angelique. I'll just ask, you mentioned that it's sort of a movement that is now in the Netherlands, where you have some civil servants who are speaking up against policies that don't sit well with them from a moral perspective.
It's not sit well, because then it becomes like a personal perspective. I have personal perspectives on many policies. I've had them for 21 years, but I've never spoken out. It's when policy crosses the line of your the content of your oath of office, the Constitution, international legal framework.
And so you've built this coalition here in the Netherlands, and you speak about other civil servants in the West, broadly defined. Say in the United States, for instance, you mentioned. Is there an expansion of this coming togetherness that goes beyond kind of just sort of the West? Because I think, as Francesca already pointed out, we really in a moment where we need to find a broader form of togetherness that goes beyond. And I was just curious if you have also a method to go beyond outside just civil servants in the West, broadly defined.
Yeah, but I think that there's a particular role for civil servants in the West, given the position of our governments in this particular instance. So we are also discussing this, like how can we, because we feel it's a part of our diplomacy and importance of our. It's a part of national interest to work on connections with the global majority or global south or whatever name you want to give it. And we see now what is happening as former diplomats and even civil servants still in office, that we have lost all credibility. We have lost all agency. Whatever. It was already like a struggle with the global majority. So we are thinking of outreach in that sense. I was, for example, at the Hague Group a few weeks back that it was launched. I don't know if you know, it was 9 countries from the global majority who really spoke out on, that they want to hold Israel effectively accountable. Our states for now are not going to be part of a coalition like that. So we do that like at an informal level. We try to do this outreach, but I think it's our democracies that are. So there's Gaza, but there's also our democracies that are at stake here. So that is the sort of unifying factor that we have as a network.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause for all our 3 speakers for their presentation. So this was just the first round to get where everyone is coming from and what everyone has to say. Francesca, I had left you with a question about the interconnectedness of the struggles that are linking with Palestine. You already mentioned, Angelique, the Hague Group, for instance, that has come together to bring Israel to account for what has happened in Gaza and what continues to happen right now in Palestine. Would you have some sentiments to share there on how we can come together at a global level, also to draw the interconnectedness of our struggles with Palestine?
Rather than sentiment, I can share what I see happening, because probably what is been a great advantage for me over the past months is having been exposed to what happens in various realities. And there are some common features. So first of all, yes, there is interconnectedness of struggles. Not necessarily with the decolonization movement per se, because it seems that Palestine has been forced to miss the train. Was locked up while all the other countries were sort of breaking the chains of colonialism. And still, it's also exposing the extent to which other countries which have gone through the decolonization process have not liberated themselves to the fullest, because eventually decolonization is enjoying the right of a people to exist as a people, free from oppression and domination. And if we look at a number of countries outside of Europe, outside of, let's say, white liberal democracies, I would say, the settler colonial bloc, in fact, it's good to call it, because this is still what it is. We see countries where the control over natural resources, think of Congo, for example, remains acute and violates the right of self-determination of the Congolese people. So now I think that Palestine can also lead in the emancipation of other people in their struggle to liberate themselves from control that it was of a criminal king like centuries ago, and today is enacted by corporations and multinationals. So that ICJ advisory opinion gives a lot of hope also to inspire and redirect the legal interpretation to, gives direction and probably room for action in other places. But the interconnectedness that I see is of struggles that are, to me, obvious now. But when we talk of indigenous people, I've been meeting with indigenous people from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States. The United States, no, but we have the feeling that indigenous people in the countries that I've mentioned have enjoy privileges. Finally, they are recognized. It's been, to me, I mean, I don't mean to be judgmental, but the reconciliation with indigenous communities more face-saving than reality, because they keep on being deprived of their self-determination, because either you fit in the categories that the settler colonial power has established, either you fit or you are treated as an outcast. And Palestine, as being the rallying call for many to it's reactivating calls for justice. Or think of the Sami population in Norway. It has suffered similar wounds to other colonized people. It's incredible. It's in Europe, and they were treated as. There was something very interesting that was said during a meeting with the Sami, the indigenous population of Norway. I met those in Norway, but they are across Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And they were saying we were treated differently because before, we used to say among us. They're saying that we preceded the Jews because we were not white. We were not white. You are white. No, they were not. And you understand that they were not Christians. This is the thing. They were native like the others, but they were not Christians. And this is the thing. And then I understood it's still like the emancipation process from the power structures of today remind very much the emancipation from patriarchy. And it's happening. Look at the young generation, the Gen Z, they call it. But it's incredible what they are doing. They recognize themselves as primarily in the struggle for environmental justice, to save the planet, which is incredible, and it's incredibly important because hand in hand they recognize themselves in what is happening in Palestine, because of course they see the environmental impact. So, and there are so many other struggles. So we have to think out of the box and reach out to others, because until we stay in our silos, it will be difficult to fully explain to fully experience the togetherness that we are evoking tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we now have an opportunity to open the floor to questions from participants in the audience. I have my colleague Max over there. He has the microphone. And we will pick a few questions at a time, and please, you can address them to either one of the speakers. Shall we start from the extreme left? I see a hand over there. Pun unintended.
Yeah, I have a question for the three speakers from their perspectives. I would like you maybe to share one or two victory, achievement, a spot of light that we can look at and maybe we're not very much aware of that happened in the last year and a half.
Great question. We have another hand over there.
First, thanks for all the speakers for all the inputs that they gave. I just have two questions, one regarding hope that was mentioned, and in terms of international law. I know that everyone here is coming with this idea that international law is really working, but if we are coming from a region where really suffered from international law and people really lost hope of international law, I think just also to all three speakers, why do you still believe in international law to its fullness, or is it more it's a tool that you are using it as a intermediate?
Awesome. Maybe we take these two questions for now because they're to all the three speakers, and we'll take a second round of questions after this. Would you like to start, Angelique?
Maybe one thing of the thing, what is a victory or achievement is I think that build a coalition with people that it's also been a very much a confrontation with my own prejudice, you know. So I had an idea of who are my allies within the organization I worked with, amongst former colleagues. And it's not always been the people that I most expected, people that also worked in the Middle East and know the context and basically fully agreed with me. But there are some people that have become an ally that I'd never expected to be these very traditional, diplomats that grew up and lived their whole life, apart from when they were ambassadors or diplomats, in the Benoordenhout in The Hague. And they are out with us every single week in front of the ministry. So it is... That is one thing, and just in the sense of like organizational capacity, what we've developed as essentially a group of volunteers. We've had Daniel Levy come and speak. We've had Francesca. We had a big meeting
passing by
with Francesca. Passing by.
I just passed by and I found these people there. Oh, hello, Angelique.
Who's that woman? We've had Josh Paul, we've had Izzedine Abouish come. We had a big transatlantic. I don't know if it might not be on your radar anymore because there's so many things happening. I lose track as well. But we had a big launch of a big statement of 800 officials last year around this time from within the transatlantic network. So yeah, but we just want the bombs to stop, right? We want the policy to change. So it is achievement, but yeah. Your question was on hope with regard to international law. Yeah, I've kind of personally been involved in quite a major case. My former husband is Palestinian from Gaza, who lost 6 relatives in 2014, and we have been pursuing justice, or he does that now independently, basically since that time. And it is an extremely long and difficult and arduous struggle. And we had a meeting with Francesca 2 days ago, and I went there sort of like business-like, and I've taken, as you can imagine, after the force, some distance. But just in that meeting, there was a reiteration of what happened in 2014, and I felt it again, like, in my system. I had to recover of just listening, and I wasn't prepared for that. And I think that is what is often underestimated for those who go through these kinds of trajectories, how much the emotional investment it takes of people. So yes, I am trained as an international lawyer and a human rights lawyer, so I have a lot of faith in the system. I don't see an alternative for it yet, but it's not, and in our instance, it's an outcome of a whole lot of privilege, because of course there is evidently, I don't know how many Palestinians in Gaza who experience the same or worse, who have not even this recourse to justice. So, I'm in two minds.
Thank you. And Omar?
Achievements. I don't have hours, so I'll have to be very brief. 2 years ago, we had 0 countries supporting a military embargo of Israel. 0, as in not even South Africa. Today, we have 53 countries that officially call for the military embargo of Israel. Intel, not too long ago, was forced, partly by BDS, to quit a $25 billion, with a B, dollar project near Tel Aviv. And again, BDS played a key role in that. McDonald's is suffering tremendously because of the BDS campaign. Again, 2 years ago, we had one university that had ended relations with Israeli universities because of their complicity, and that was the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, obviously. Today, we have tens of universities that have either cut relations or are in the process of divesting or cutting academic ties with Israeli universities. In the cultural sphere, there's so much to talk about, but just very quickly, the most recent achievement is 7,000 and running publishers and writers have now joined the cultural boycott of Israel, which targets institutions, obviously. And I can go on and on, but that's just a sample. As far as international law, You accused us of thinking it works. I never said such a thing. I said that it's a necessary but never sufficient condition. Why is it still necessary, despite the fact that we know who were the powers that put most of international law together, who have abused international law for decades against the powerless and the less powerful people like us? So that no one needs to lecture Palestinians about the problems of international law. Believe me, every single Palestinian can recite all the flaws in international law. And I'm sure in Congo they can do the same, and Sudan and Chile and a lot of countries. We can recite the flaws of international law. But the alternative is the law of the jungle. The might makes right. The US, European, colonial power type of law. We cannot let that be the law of the land. So it is in our interest as oppressed communities. It's not a dogmatic commitment to this nice thing called international law. It's a tool, as you said, a very important tool, because otherwise the powerful will eat us up. I mean, just look at Trump. Do you want that to be the future of humanity? It's exactly Netanyahu, Trump. I mean, that's the future of humanity, unless we all try to salvage international law. So it's important, I think, as a tool.
And Francesca, the same two questions.
So in terms of successes, and again, it's not necessarily a success in the sense it's achieved, yay, let's have a party. No, I mean, it's a positive development. First of all, I don't think, and Omar, correct me if you think I'm wrong, seriously, but I, as long as I remember, there has never been such an awareness and such a connection of what happens to the Palestinians as a settler colonial enterprise as now. In the sense, this has been very well understood and owned by the Palestinians and revendicated, denounced by the Palestinians. But Palestine again is educating us, is awakening us about what colonialism is, has been, and continues to be. So, and apartheid. I mean, I can't. Years ago, it was impossible to talk in. I mean. In public buildings, with government officials and parliamentarians about apartheid without them starting to panic and see if there were phones or microphones around them. But in this part of the world, things have changed. And you say, yeah, but there was a genocide. And still, there are genocide deniers. So there is a greater awareness about the reality of what Israel is and does to the Palestinians. And I think that the ICC arrest warrants, in as much as they have exposed the limitations of it, again, they have prompted some states to show their true colors and or the limitation of their morality, also the length of the chain they have. And at the same time, they have shown how much other member states are ready to sacrifice of their own interests, South Africa, first and foremost. But South Africa is not alone. There are other countries. Again, the Hague Group has 9, but there are other countries that are joining the initiative. I mean, they are behind, and those of us who have seen this initiative growing, even me very recently, but I'm very inspired and excited about that. And also the ICJ, always to say, this is the first part. The ICJ, I know you asked me too, but ICC, ICJ go in the same direction, in the sense international justice is law, but when it moves, and we need to make good use of it. And the advisory opinion denouncing the legality of the occupation in its totality is a seismic shift, but we need to use it. And we need to learn the lesson from the past, because in 2004, it was that ICJ, and again, Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was the ICJ advisory opinion that prompted the conscientization that then has led to the creation of the BDS movement, because it was very clear Israel couldn't build a wall inside the occupied Palestinian territory. accidentally annexing water basins and parts of the land which had been stolen to build the settlements, etc., etc. So finally, the court had said it and nothing moved. And this is where you had the Palestinians and others coming together and starting the BDS. The BDS is very much about the application of the international law. So now we need to make use of it, especially now that there is more preparedness to use strategic litigation. And the last thing about international law is a tool, but it's not a magic wand. If there is one thing that it's not, it's a neutral thing, and this is why I appreciate Omar using international law and ethics. It's true, you cannot have one without the other, without leading to the disaster that we have. But I also think that, so international law, we should see particularly human rights, not as a tool of emancipation as they are today. They've been historically the result of emancipation. We didn't have human rights before, and we don't have human rights because all of a sudden the Netherlands or Italy or others have decided to write norms that will protect human beings. The codification of human rights is the result of struggles of people like us. And this is why we need to shake also the sense of comfort that we have, but we have international law, why doesn't it work? Because it's not a remote control. It's not a magic wand, it's not a remote control. So we need it, we have it, let's try to make it work. And if it doesn't work, the multilateral system, which I accept, I'm critical of the foundation and the colonial foundation of the international system, but let's open our eyes. Colonialism, it was such an eye-opener. Last year, I heard Omar saying, and I've said it like probably 365 times more since then, colonialism is 500 years of our history. It doesn't get out of our DNA like that. And do you think that international law is the only thing that is colonized or suffers colonization? Have you looked at medicines, architectures, economics, and the rest? So let's take this as an opportunity to understand and to use what we have as a tool and not as divine providence. Voilà.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think, considering that we started a little late, we still have time for one more round of questions, if people would be patient with us. So now we start in the center. I see one question. Oh, there's already the mic over there, so we start over there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Giorgio. I'm a lawyer from Indonesia, and I'm also Gen Z. I have a question. So I know that international law, at least the current framework we're having right now, is made after two countries did certain things, such as genocide, racialist policies, racist, I'll just say it straight, and they also invaded their neighbors at the time. And afterwards, we have seen many examples where countries with human rights violations got punished justly. Now, usually, I'm not a proponent of interventionism. I'm a very anti-interventionist person normally, but seeing what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, looking at literal genocide happening, I'm now bringing up the jus cogens here. Why isn't no one calling for the same solution of the problem of the Zionist entity, as has been proven in the past with the countries that the genocide invaded their neighbors and racist policies? We've called for sanctions. That's great. We've called for ceasefires. But why is the international community, I mean, including Asia, Latin America, and Africa, not calling for military intervention, regime change, and other more material international law solutions that have been implemented before to other countries that have done human rights violations? Thank you.
So, interesting question. One question there. We have time for one more question. Mike, I see a hand over here. Persistent.
Hello. Thank you very much for the speakers, really amazing speakers. I'm Nuruddin from Gaza. I have one question mainly for Francesca, but I also would love to hear from the other speakers. So when you say something on the stage or on the stand or on the media, usually you get attacked by pro-Zionist or pro-Israeli factions. Now, those attacks mostly don't even bother to mention Palestine. They're mostly personalized attacks. Like, this report is entirely invalid from first to end because you're anti-Semitic, or because you are biased, or because you are this or you are that. How do you refocus the attention not on yourself but on the thing that you're actually saying, and how do you even identify that case where the attack is not even to the content that you're presenting but to your person? Thank you.
Great. Shall we take one more question? Yeah, from this side. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much for everyone on the panel. I'm very happy to be here and hear you speak. In the recent days, we've been hearing Trump, for example, talking a lot about emptying Gaza, turning it into the Riviera, where everyone can come to it except the Gazans themselves. They're envisioned as being sent to Jordan or Egypt, and Jordan and Egypt had very strict responses to that this will not be accepted in some ways, and Saudi Arabia is negotiating terms with the Arab League about this. So my question is, you responded, I think, very concisely once to this, calling it nonsense, which it is, and it is illegal. But the question that I have is that if the international community and international court basically has allowed not allowed, but like, yeah, how can I put it? Could not stop a genocide. How would it stop the displacement of Palestinians in this context when this is something that has been going on for a long time?
Yeah, so 3 questions there. First, why no intervention in Israel with the justification of saving the Palestinian people? Who would like to take that one?
I can take it.
Francesca.
Because it's impossible without the authorization of the Security Council. Otherwise, it would be an unlawful use of force. And this is unacceptable. I know that what other countries have been doing over the past 20 years might have led you to think otherwise, but the use of force is unlawful if it's not in response to an attack from another state, and if not authorized by the Security Council. And similarly, even the deployment of a protective, even a peacekeeping force must be authorized by the Security Council. I've been advocating for something mild. I've not even said peacekeeping. I've said protective presence, which frankly, it's not the terms of art. I mean, something that I'm trying to say, can you guys out there do something? Including the internationals who are currently there, the diplomats, or the NGOs, and those who are on the ground. Because it's not even a very creative or new idea. It has been done in the past. UNRWA, during the first Intifada, used to send its internationals around not to protect the Palestinians. Do not imagine the Highlander out there trying to defend the Palestinians. However, it has been proven to have dissuaded some of the most violent attacks. But the Palestinians were exposed to nothing as violent as what they are facing today. There are real pogroms happening, and they've been happening all over 2023. I counted and I reported in October 2023 about nearly 20 pogroms, assaults, mobs, on incinerations of Palestinian villages and towns. So despite this, it's so far very, very difficult, very unlikely. Which doesn't mean that it might not change, but the political constellation might change. It's very interesting what you say about regime change. because it's been the best, the favorite cake to bring from Europe to whomever country in the global south. Pardon me for lack of better words. I mean, global south because it's for forever. But the thing, look at the paradox. I mean, member states, including the Netherlands, keep on saying, "But where are you helping the Palestinian Authority to reform itself in perpetuity?" Now, the only thing you don't have the right to melt yourself into other people's politics. Otherwise, why don't you do that? Since you have settlers in the Israeli government right now, or look at what we have in Europe. As an Italian, I have some grounds out there. But the point is that this is not what is due to the Palestinians. The Palestinians have the right of self-determination. So it's about making sure that they are free from occupation, settlements, and control of their resources. But again, this is why we are here and trying to understand what can be done to provoke that political shift. Concerning the attacks against me, I wouldn't put it as against me. It's against what is the content of my mandate's findings and the international law that is used to understand all this, which exposes, in fact, the brutality of the unlawful occupation, apartheid, and the genocide. Of course, I do not expect them to be particularly pleased at my findings, and their smear is intended. They understand that, especially with me, every attack turns into more visibility, but they're not bothered because meanwhile they have ruined my reputation and they have made me and others controversial. But again, this is why we need to keep on educating, because again, I'm irritated but something that I experience in this country, and again, I don't want to make it about me, but I want you to reflect upon it, something. I've had meetings in the parliament, and they were fantastic. And so it's not true that the parliamentarians didn't want to meet me. The Foreign Affairs Committee didn't want to meet me because it came under pressure by pro-Israel groups and Christian Zionist organizations. So these are, it should worry you as Dutch people, because you see what they refused to meet with a UN expert, independent expert, and they gave in to pressure. But the point is that the argument that was used is that I had offended, one of the arguments is that I had insulted a Dutch politician. Which it depends on what is offended, because if the politician in question has said something that refers to a conduct which is prohibited under international law, it's likely that I've picked on him, but I don't remember, because for me it makes no difference. It can be from the left, from the right, really from Nigeria or Norway, it doesn't make a difference. Has any journalist or any other parliamentarian asked to see this statement that I would have allegedly put out? So you see the brouhaha around nothing. So worse than stupidity, which is okay, stupidity is okay, the performance of stupidity is untenable. And on Trump, I would like just to say something is not new. It's not new. It's the previous government has enabled and funded and offered political shielding to what Israel has done, and with a poker face that I've never seen, but it was really official policy. Anyone had to perform stupidity and use a poker face while saying, well, we have found no crimes. We have found no crimes. Can you look better? But this is why I say there is no real change, but there is a psychological overwhelming. Every morning we wake up and there is something more grotesque, more horrendous that shocks us, and everyone is paralyzed. Oh, what do we make of this? What do we make of that? It's the same thing as before. It's just more worrisome because, and this is what I'm really scared about, this language is the new normal. Now people will discuss around these terms. You see, you'd think Jordan had a strong reaction. Yeah, the first 72 hours, probably less. and then started to say, I'm really concerned, started to say, we will find a solution that accommodates everyone. There can't be a solution that accommodates everyone because it's really polarly opposed position. The genocidaire wants to get rid of the Palestinians and want to put them in your land partially, and the Palestinians don't want to be displaced. What are you going to accommodate? The only thing that people need to do is to remind themselves and others that Israel has no voice, no word, nothing to say about the present and future of the Palestinians other than paying reparations and making sure if it's true that Israel has a solid justice system to investigate and prosecute at least some of those who have been involved in the genocide and counting.
Awesome, thank you. Does another one of our speakers want to respond to some of the questions, the intervention or?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the issue about repression. Attacks on Francesca and so on, it's a form of repression. Part of that repression is meant to divert attention from the issue, as you said. So Francesca's report is about genocide as colonial erasure, so let's attack her person. So she responds, she falls into a defensive trap, she doesn't. But let's say someone who's not so strong, not from the south of Italy, let's say a Danish person.
Which one?
They easily fall into that trap. I'm just trying to contrast with the south of Italy. Norwegian.
No, Norwegian are better.
Okay.
Maybe Dutch. Joking. I'm joking.
So they would fall into the trap, and no, I'm not anti-Semitic. Yes, you are, and then they start defending themselves. Great, then it succeeded. The bullying and the intimidation and the smears succeed because by repeating the accusation, even by negating it, you reinforce it. Mm-hmm. So usually sometimes I am smeared and so on, not that I care. 99% I ignore it. I only respond if it's mainstream. So if it's those trashy lobby, yellow media, I don't respond to because who cares? I mean, they're trashy fascists, who cares? But if it's something really mainstream, and mainstream as in globally has some weight, then I have to respond because there's a big audience out there that may get the wrong idea. So I by responding, I never fall into the trap of defending, no, I'm not. I go back to the main issue. So because I'm advocating for my people's right, because there's a genocide, because there's settler colonialism and so on, they're trying to conflate advocacy of Palestinian rights with racism against Jewish people. And there's absolutely no conflation. In fact, the accusation itself is anti-Semitic because it reduces Israel and all Jews to being one and the same, and that's a very anti-Semitic statement. So, so again, you put back the issue of, yes, we're talking about Gaza, yes, we're talking about the issue, because repression wants to center the accused and the accusation, not the issue, not the oppression. So we always bring it back to the oppression. That's the key point. Very quickly on Trump, and I've written this recently in an article, what really bothers Palestinians, one of the things that bothers us about the attacks on Trump, what about Biden? I mean, this guy hasn't done anything yet. He's just talking. The other guy, a genocidaire, 100%, funded, enabled, armed, defended, treated Palestinians as less than roaches. And he gets away with the liberal media? So whatever happened to any modicum of understanding and justice and equality?
Thank you so much. I think we've run out of time for interventions and questions and now reached the end of our program. I would like to extend a very warm thank you to all of you for braving this amazing weather outside to come here and engage with the issue, really the issue of our times, which is the question of Palestine. Very thankful also to the people that are watching online who have joined us virtually to participate in this conversation. A big thank you to Pakhuis Ceasefire and to the the legal organization, the organizers of this event, those ones. Apologies. It's not easy to deal with these questions, and the easier thing is to hide and hope the storm passes, but the storm is not going to pass until we face it. The issue is not going to go away until we deal with it. And it's a big thank you to our speakers who have come here and shared their insights to give us a bit of understanding of what's going on and to help us see a bit of the light at the end of the tunnel. Palestine is, I think it has shown us the threshold of what human depravity is, but also at this particular moment has shown us the threshold of what human solidarity can look like. Because the whole world is really focused on Palestine, and you've got people all across from Asia, Africa, Latin America coming together and saying, until we solve this problem, none of us are free. And until Palestine is free, none of us are free. And until we understand justice in the way it is expressed in Palestine, then we don't have justice anywhere else. So thank you very much to everyone, and thank you very much to our speakers. As a point of information, I just wanted to mention some of the upcoming events here at the Pakhuis. In particular, between 16 and 22 March, we've got the Week Against Racism. So please bring your friends, bring your colleagues, participate, join the conversations. There are more events upcoming, as you can see on the screen. Pakhuis needs your support, so you can support by becoming a friend. You can support by participating in events, but when you become a friend, it's more really helpful. There's a QR code that's over there. If you're also viewing online, the QR code will also work for you. You can use it to make a donation and to help with the program, because justice for Palestine is not going to come unless we all come together and work together. Much appreciated to everyone. In closing, I'd like to say, you know, in my country where I come from, in Zimbabwe, we have a saying that says, "Ukanzwa ngoma yoririsa, yave kuda kubaruka." What it means is if you hear a drum sounding very loud, it means it just might be about to tear. So if you see the racists, the fascists, the haters coming out and being loud, it might not be because they are emboldened, but because they are afraid. Because the world is aware of what is happening. And unless we all come together and bravely fight, they will not retreat back into the shadows where they belong. So thank you. Thank you.